As I'm sure you all know, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But how does it get this nickname? What does it actually do? If you guessed that it makes energy for the cell, you're right, but it's how it makes this energy that's so interesting. There are actually three processes the cell uses to make ATP, the basic unit of energy in a cell: Krebs cycle and electron transport chain in the mitochondria, and glycolysis in the cytoplasm. Remember that glycolysis part, it'll be important for later. But before we get into how mitochondria actually make energy, we first need to take a look at its structure. Mitochondria has four parts. The first part is the outer membrane. It has a lot of pores in it, so it's easy to move small stuff in and out. The second part is the intermembrane space. It's filled with stuff that the outer membrane lets in, and a ton of protons. Remember that part too. The third part is the highly folded inner membrane. These folds are called cristae, and it's really good at keeping charged particles out. And the final part is the matrix, the space inside the inner membrane, and that's where all the energy is actually produced. The outer membrane is porous, but mitochondria aren't that big. They can't let a molecule as big as glucose in. So how do mitochondria make energy if they can't use glucose? Remember that glycolysis thing I mentioned earlier? Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm, and it splits a glucose molecule into two pyruvates and produces 2 ATP. We don't need to go too in depth, but the main takeaways from glycolysis are that 1. Glycolysis splits a 6-carbon glucose into two 3-carbon pyruvates. 2. Mitochondria use pyruvates and oxygen to make energy. And 3. Glycolysis makes a hell of a lot less ATP than mitochondria do. Once these pyruvates enter the mitochondria, energy production can begin. There are two processes that mitochondria uses to make energy: Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. Both of these processes remove a ton of protons and pump them into the intermembrane space. Since there's a way higher concentrations of protons outside of the inner membrane, the protons want to diffuse back into the matrix, but they can't get directly through the membrane. The only way they can get back inside is through a protein called ATP synthase. ATP synthase lets protons flow in, which causes some of its subunits to spin. Each time these subunits spin, an ATP molecule is produced. As long as the mitochondria has a steady supply of pyruvates and oxygen, it'll keep pumping protons into the intermembrane space. As long as there are protons in the intermembrane space, ATP synthase will keep churning out energy for the cell. I didn't get into too much detail about how glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain actually work, because each of these have enough content to be their own videos, but the important takeaways from this video are that 1. Mitochondria are double membrane organelles that produce ATP. 2. Mitochondria need oxygen and pyruvates to produce energy. 3. Mitochondria rely on glycolysis to make pyruvates since they can't directly use glucose. And 4. Krebs cycle and electron transport chain make more than 15 times as much energy as glycolysis.